live. All right, so we are live now on YouTube. It should come over on the page shortly. If you guys are waiting, thank you so much for joining us live for episode 27 of One with the Films. We'll get started shortly. Yeah, get excited. It's going to be a good one.
All right.
Okay, there we go. We were on a... It was running in the background as well. Okay, cool.
I'm waiting for it to go up on YouTube.
All right. Perfect. Alrighty.
There we go.
All right. Welcome, you knocks, gundots, rats, and mats, and all you other fools, all you Harvards, Duncans, and Red Sox fans. How are you? How's your mother? Welcome to One with the Films. Anyway, welcome to Season 2, Episode 27. You know, we're like that leftover Tupperware in the fridge you forget about until it stinks up the whole thing. You know, for those of you turning in for the first time, you know, listen, I'm sorry, but just, you know, you better know what you're getting yourself into. You know, we're your favorite unhinged, occasionally charming, you know, brothers from different mothers. So grab your donuts, your lattes, and your Funky Bunch CDs, and your Criterion collections. I'm Movie K-Man the Third, and like Marky Mark in acting, I'm surprisingly good when I try, and in the right hands. And almost more intriguing than the phrase Academy Award nominee Mark Wahlberg is our Aussie with Moxie, Naf. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
I'm doing a Star Wars.
You're doing a Star Wars?
That's the best Boston accent. I can't do it. But like, it's
no,
funny
please
watching
try.
these movies, you kind of leave wanting to be like, hey, why are you doing a Star Wars? That's all I got.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely leave wanting to do a Star Wars. For those joining us via TikTok also, by the way, hop over to the One with the Films on YouTube if you want to hear the other side of this conversation, even though
they're just going to hear silence on your end, are they?
Oh yeah, 100%. For the 7 of you guys there, thank you for joining us. And you will be very entertained to hear me on this end, I am sure. But nonetheless, Naf, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm Naf, one of the co-hosts of this podcast with this handsome chap, and it's lovely seeing you again, as always. Every week, I look forward to this because I get to see your face.
Oh, of course.
I look even more forward to it when I get your face and faces of some of my other favorite people. And we've got my very good friend My Two Credits joining us today, and he's brought 2 films with him because... I don't know, he thinks he's better than everyone
because
else?
Because settle for one.
I do have an intro for him if you would like me to kick that off.
I definitely want you to kick that off. But yeah, I told him, like, let's bring a film over, and he was like, well, fuck you, I'm going to do 2. I was like, okay, sorry.
That's true. This is our first double feature.
Double feature.
Double
All right,
feature.
You introduce my friend.
All right, so now for our Infernal Affair. Now, our dear friend, our fantasy football 2022 reigning champion, the King of Kings. Let's hear his 2 credits out as we welcome Zane to his episode of One with the Films, the Mr. Outgoing himself. Now, how you doing, Zane?
I'm surprised you guys didn't have enough of me when we were last on. So thank you for bringing me back. I mean, appreciate you.
We talked for like 3 hours about Andor, and then we finished the conversation, and we were like, we didn't talk enough about it. So, and we talk almost every day anyway, so you know Andor. I can't get enough of you.
We talked 3 hours about Andor, and then we started the podcast.
Yeah.
And then we talked another 2 hours. Like,
go big or go home, fellas.
Exactly. It's one of those things where we have, like, you know, listen, we like to go all out here, and this is just absolutely fantastic. Kenny's in chat. Welcome back, Ken. And so we're very excited to get started off with you, Zane. Now, obviously, you brought 2 films with us. Now, if you have a couple of things on a little bit of facts about these films. Do you want to kind of go into that, or do you want to kind of...
How about I tell people why they're here first, and then I'll give you some fun facts on the film.
That's a better idea. Let's do that.
Right? So those of you that have been following us for a while, we've actually just started another segment called Brews and Bullshit as well, which is a bit more like unstructured, just conversation. We had a couple episodes on the Bad Batch over the last 2 weeks, which was great, so go and check those out. They will be available to stream on demand on Spotify soon, but they are on YouTube still, so you can go and check them out. But for today, this segment is called the Weekly Watch List, and for the uninitiated, the Weekly Watch List is where Kay and I force each other and you to watch one of our personal favorite films that we haven't seen before. The goal is to be introducing each other to something that we adore. And if by chance we can do the same for you, then of course there's nothing better than that. But from time to time, we bring on somebody with much better taste than us to introduce us to one of their favorite films and jump on in with
Or
us
worse.
and talk about what makes it special. Yeah. It's a perfect little slice of the day where a bunch of nerds get to obsess over the art form we adore, and we are so glad to have you with us. Now, with these two films this week, it worked out quite well because we've been talking with my two credits about getting him on the show for a while, and we've been kind of struggling to find the time, pick the movie, because the goal is that we always want people to have not seen the film. Somebody on the chat needs to have not seen the film. That's the goal. And a lot of the films that we talked about, a lot of my two credits faves, either I had seen or Keegs had seen. So it
Suffice
was like,
to say,
what do we do?
Zane has good taste.
He has great taste. But we lucked out here in the fact that I had seen neither of these films and Keegan had only seen The Departed before. So he still got to experience Infernal Affairs and I got to experience both. And now Zane gets to talk about it. And Kenny was talking about Bicentennial Man, and I'm really excited to watch that soon as
same.
well, because that's one of my like childhood faves, and I don't know if it holds up, but I really want to watch it again.
We
I
should
will
call that.
say-
We should call that series "Let's Ruin My Childhood"
Dude.
and like rewatch old films that we don't remember, but we remember liking as kids.
Yeah.
I will say that it might be worthwhile to let the chat know if you haven't seen The Departed or Infernal Affairs. The Departed is a remake of Infernal Affairs. And so I am nothing if not resourceful and thinking out of the box to present this idea over.
Yeah.
But if you're wondering why there's two movies, that is why. It is a remake, and that is why we're discussing it.
I mean, we'll be talking full
Yes.
spoilers for both. So if you're watching this live, I mean,
Yes.
I don't want you to leave us, but if you have to, you have to. Okay.
Yes,
We're going to be
just to
available
echo
on
this
demand as
over
well.
with just to echo this over with TikTok as well. We are talking a full spoiler review of both The Departed and Infernal Affairs. It's so exciting talking about how these two movies kind of compare and contrast, how they kind of overlap, where they took definitely different kind departures, dare I say, from each other.
Sorry.
Comedy. And so now, as you do this, as we start going, we actually wanted to do a little bit of it's a different kind of style from how we typically do things. So Snaf actually ended up seeing Infernal Affairs before I did. We had a couple of friends, did a movie night. He went to go and see that, and I saw The Departed a long time ago. Really liked it. So that was kind of my frame of reference, and I just finished watching Infernal Affairs. So as
Fresh
this
off
kind
the
of is
press.
happening, literally like still hot off the press there. So it's one of those things. Yeah, Kenny
I
did
just-
put in. Keep in mind, 20+ year film spoilers
The
incoming.
thing is, he said it, and I was like, "What do you mean? The film's not that old. It came out in 2002." And then I was like, "Oh god."
Yeah,
Jesus.
this film.
It's like I remember
is
that I'm
almost as old
28
as
on
us.
Wednesday. Jesus.
Exactly. Like you're close to 30, and
Hey,
like
hey,
it's
hey,
one
hey,
of
hey,
those
hey.
things.
Hey,
I said
I'm
close.
close to 28. Okay.
You are very close to
Um,
28, and then a couple days closer to 30.
Bree has joined us in chat as well. Hey Bree, thanks for joining us. So yes, 20+ year film spoilers happening today. Now we were talking about our films, and we were talking about who chose them. So we know that we're talking Infernal Affairs and we're talking The Departed today. And my two credits as Handsome Man has brought them for us as well. So why did you pick these two films, Zane?
Ooh, I would say that The Departed is one of my all-time favorite movies. The cast is just incredible. And then for someone who has seen it, most people don't know that it's a remake. And so that concept to me is fascinating because I think there's some people that will see it and think it's a fantastic film, and then they'll critique it one way or the other to perhaps say that the remake is not as good or better than the original.
Yeah.
And that concept fascinates me. So I thought it was a perfect kind of medium to discuss.
And it's like, well,
Honestly,
we've
I
got a
really
podcast where
love
we
the
talk.
fact that you brought that in.
How dare you interrupt me?
Fuck you.
White people, right? Jesus.
What?
No, I was gonna say that
The caucasity is real.
literally. I don't know what I was gonna say actually. The ADHD is gone. It's gone.
Don't worry, I know what I was gonna say, so
Go.
I'll just dominate like the imperialist I am. So now here's what's gonna happen. So yeah, I really thought that was a very interesting point to bring up, given the fact that you can talk about one or the other, or like tends to bring one there, but it's really interesting to kind of look at both of these. It's like talking about the book and the movie version, right? You know, it's a very interesting idea with it. And Eliana, I don't think that you're going to really miss much with spoilers. I think it's actually, if anything, it might encourage you to see this film more. Because I think
What do you mean
it's
this
very,
film? These films, Keegan. Grammar.
these filmi. And so as we go with it, what I'm really excited about is to talk about the kind of the basis that we have. So going with that, Naf, do you want to hit us with some film facts?
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Going?
I've put together a little bit of information on these films, and obviously we're going to discuss it at length. And My Two Credits has brought some, like, you guys know a little bit of the behind-the-scenes story as well, so we'll talk at length about that. But for this week, we have two films. One was released in 2002, and the remake in 2006 was directed by Martin Scorsese, fresh off the back of his 2004 hit performance in DreamWorks' Shark Tale. The original film has a budget of 6.4 million USD and brought in a modest 8.7 million, with an opening weekend of only 25,000 US dollars across 5 theaters, obviously locally. The latter was made on a $90 million budget and brought in a much healthier $292 million, which cemented the fact that Americans can take anything from foreigners, make it bigger and longer, and the people will eat it up without any questions. Starring Tony Leung and Andy Lau, the original film was directed by Andrew Lau and Alan Mack and was a darling at the Small Time Awards, being nominated for 26 separate awards and winning 24. It has an IMDb rating of 8 out of 10 from 128,000 reviews and a Letterboxd score of 3.9. The remake, which came out only 4 years later, has an 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb with only slightly more reviews at a modest 1.4 million. And it stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, and Jack Nicholson, and won 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Adapted Screenplay, and Editing. And was also a nomination for everyone's favorite Transformers dad, Mark Wahlberg. She's a minor. We're protected by the Romeo and Juliet laws, which I carry around in my wallet. Michael Bay, what were you thinking, bro? What were you thinking?
I don't understand. Oh my god.
I don't get it. I don't. So that's a little bit on those two films. So what did we know about these films going in? Keegan, you said that you'd seen Departed already.
Yeah, a buddy way back, I was in high school, and a buddy of mine was into The Departed, like obsessed with this movie. Was one of, like, he was really into all like Best Picture winners, and this was like his, like, I think his favorite. And he would always make fun of me for not seeing it. And then at one point, I kid you not, this is a true story. I was so interested in seeing this movie. My mom at some point had got it for me for an Easter present, because sometimes we would do like the Easter basket thing, right? Like, cute. So like you go and find your Easter basket, you do this whole thing. So here I am on Easter watching The Departed, like just casually eating chocolate as I see people get mauled, shot, and like just beaten to shit. Like, and I was like, I don't know. It seems like a perfect Easter to me. And so like kind of seems appropriate. And so
it's a favorite American pastime, chocolate and death.
Great American pastime, death.
Hey, I mean, honestly, like, so as exemplified by these films. Like,
and what about Infernal Affairs? So you hadn't
Infernal Affairs.
Did you know The Departed was a remake?
Yes, because I had heard that at some point, like whether it was just looking at the trivia or things like that. I had heard at some point that The Departed was a remake of Infernal Affairs, and I had always heard that as sort of a thing of what was interesting to me was the idea that you know, it was always used in the discussion about remakes. Was like The Departed is kind of one of those where it's like technically it is a remake, but it's also one of those films that if you were to just kind of, for lack of a better phrase, limit it to being a remake, I feel like you would be doing the movie a disservice, because it is a very good movie in its own right.
Yeah.
But having seen Infernal Affairs, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a remake.
Yeah, I get you. And what about
But
you?
I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, and what about you, Zane? Like, so, what was your experience like with this film for the first time, either The Departed or Infernal Affairs? And yeah, like, what did you know going into the films?
So I watched Infernal Affairs first,
Great choice.
and then Departed came out years later. I've always really enjoyed foreign cinema, and I think that the American remakes tend to pale
Yes.
in comparison to the original. If you look at Old Boy, for example, right? Old Boy, the original is a fantastic movie. The American version doesn't compare, in my opinion.
I mean, adding to
it
that,
doesn't even touch it.
adding fuel to that fire is a film that we actually did on the podcast a couple of months ago. The Untouchables got a
I was
white
about to. I was
remake,
going to mention that too.
or a Western,
like,
a
if you
Western
take a look
remake, and
at-
it's yeah.
Or
I
if
mean, I
you take
haven't
a look
watched
at
it, but I
the Ring,
refuse.
like the original Ring, phenomenal. The remake, not so much. But then you look at The Departed, and it actually does a pretty good job. I mean, it won an Oscar, right? So,
Not just any Oscar too.
Best Picture, right? And that is rare air for a remake. And so to me, that's fascinating. And I love mob movies. Like that's one of my favorite genres of movies.
Wicked.
So it just felt right at home. And the cast is just like I'll watch anything Matt Damon. The way that Naf feels about Asajj Ventress, I feel about Matt Damon.
Are you sure? Because there are very specific ways I feel about
I was
Asajj
about
Ventress.
to say.
Like, do you want
there's
Matt
a
Damon
lot
to step on your
unpack
throat
with
and
that
crush your
statement,
windpipe?
and
Is
we
that
are in the middle of Pride? We are in the middle of Pride Month.
True.
So,
True.
you know,
That should
listen,
tone it back a little
let
bit.
that
That should
flag
tone it
fly,
back.
baby. let that flag fly.
If you were to translate in a heterosexual way the way Naf feels about
I want to give him
That would be Matt
heterosexual
Damon.
kisses.
I don't think you can. Like truly, I don't think
hey,
that's possible.
we
The
are
thing
already
is-
going unhinged.
I don't think you need to translate it because I have a heterosexual love for Asajj Ventress. So
Fair.
it I don't know. I don't know how that works scientifically, okay? But
I don't either.
I
Let's
totally
move
get
on.
you.
This is this is all.
It's gonna go downhill very fast if we keep going like this.
You're very correct.
The
We don't
View-
want to know where this will end up.
The point is that I love mob movies. I love
And you
Asian
love Matt
cinema,
Damon.
and I love Matt Damon, and it just
Which
felt like the perfect
all-
child.
Is perfect.
Yeah.
Like
I love
all
when-
is correct.
I love that like there are things that I just love about movies as well. They're just kind of like, oh, this was made for me. And it seems
Yeah.
like this is very much that for you. Like it's kind of the perfect soup to feed you. We've also got The View with Drew in chat. It says, hey everybody, what's up? What's going on?
Hey there.
We're saying hey too. And Kenny agrees. He says, my man, yes, Ventress love all day. Mummy, dommy, Ventress baby. Yeah. I would
love
give
Kenny.
I would give anything to be that trooper in the deleted scene, bro. I would give anything. Just stab me, kiss me. kill me.
I've seen that making the rounds on TikTok again.
Yeah.
Elliot brought that up again,
I
saying
wanted
that
to-
yeah, we all feel that way about Asajj, and you are correct. Anyone who doesn't is probably lying.
Yeah. I wanted to say that when you recommended The Departed as a film, Zane, I thought that this was a film about Leonardo DiCaprio or Matt Damon. I couldn't figure out who it was. I didn't realize it had both in it. And I thought it was a film where they were like a psychic that talks to ghosts to solve crimes. I don't know where that came from.
Interesting.
But like
Interesting.
the name and like the cop stuff, I was like, oh, The Departed. So he's like, he goes to crime scenes and maybe
Directed
he
by Martin
talks with the
Scorsese.
he talks with the ghosts and goes, what happened to you? And then they figure out. I don't know. I had this elaborate plot in my head for what this film was, and I mean, I was almost.
I feel like there's a creator on TikTok, and he's a big creator. I'm blanking on his name, but he does these Mad Libs where he's filling out X movie.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's make some fucking money, right?
yeah. I
Oh
love
yeah,
that
he's
guy.
great, and he does the line of cocaine first.
Yeah,
Yes,
Alright,
yes,
let's go.
yes. And I feel so bad I can't remember his name, but big time creator. But what you just mentioned, I feel like is straight out of one of his videos, like a playbook of like how to make a random fucking movie and tie it into a title, because that's what it sounds like when you mention your version of The Departed.
I don't know where it came from, but like that was what I thought. And then I also didn't know it was a remake because I didn't know much about the film. And then we were in a group chat with some friends and they were like, let's watch Infernal Affairs. And I was like, I'll jump on that. Cool. And they're like, yeah, this is the remake to The Departed. And then I messaged you, Zane, and I was like, I watched this today. And you were like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I got to watch the original first.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that did color some of my feelings towards the films as well,
Okay,
which I'm sure
so
we'll get
going-
into.
So,
yeah, like
Actually, I think that might be a good place to start
yeah,
because I think
It's a good place to start. Oh, what a
Well,
novel concept.
just because I'm very interested in I do feel like where people typically finish is the best place to start, and so as we I just want to see what face you were gonna make, but as we go into this, Neff, out of the two, you watch both.
Infernal Affairs is better.
That's what I was hoping you were gonna say because I think I prefer The Departed.
You would.
Ooh. Ooh.
You hate foreign cinema.
Tensions are high.
Like,
Okay.
what is your issue with Tony Leung specifically?
Okay.
And why do you hate
he
Asian
was-
people? And does
Well,
your
this has
dad
been
know
a
you're
great
racist?
episode, everybody. I think that this is fantastic. Well, we're my friend Raglan once said bye. And so
No, I think that it's primed for a good discussion. Like, and I mean, it's just for me. There was a couple of things that I was really impressed by in Infernal Affairs, and
oh, totally.
namely, it is snappy. Like, it's not a long film. It's what, an hour 30, I think, or an hour 35,
It's
something like that.
breakneck pace. I mean, The Departed is like an hour longer.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
That's also
what's
Scorsese.
crazy is that I didn't feel that Infernal Affairs was missing anything. It does feel, again, quite jam-packed, and it moves and then it finishes, and I was like, okay, I didn't feel like anything was missing. And then with The Departed, I didn't feel like it added things unnecessarily. Like, it uses its runtime very well. But I was very, very impressed at how effective Infernal Affairs was with the use of its time.
Fair enough.
And I think we don't give enough credit to movies that do that well. You know, a lot
True.
of and Scorsese's made some killers. I mean, like, one of my favorite films of his is Silence, which is like over 3 hours long, and that is brilliant. But
Scorsese does have an issue. I will say, for my own, Scorsese's not one of my favorites. Like, I think that he's incredibly talented. His films can be, I guess it's not that his films are hit or miss for me, because his films tend to be pretty good. It's more just because Scorsese tends to be the best figurehead for pretentious douchebag
you
film
just don't
lovers.
like him because he doesn't like the MCU, okay?
Okay, if we're gonna get into that shit, it's it's one of those things where it's tough because I like Scorsese. I think what he's done for film in general and film preservation especially is incredible. And as a filmmaker, I mean, how do you disagree with this guy? Like, this guy is fucking awesome. Like, as we talked about with Spielberg, there's a reason this guy can also be argued to be the GOAT.
Yeah.
You know, like, but
It's an
with
argument
Scorsese,
that you'll lose, but it's an argument nonetheless.
Exactly. Like, Spielberg will always win that 10 times
Spielberg
over
will
for me.
always come second to Rian Johnson, but yeah, like, it's fine. I'm kidding.
No, that's where you're wrong, but that's okay. But it's like his films though do run a bit long for my taste. Like it's more on a Scorsese film, I tend to feel the length a bit more, not necessarily with The Departed, but in some of his other films, I tend to feel a little bit more of the length. Like The Irishman, I feel a little bit more of that one dragging a bit. Like,
Do you
I had to
feel
take
that-
breaks with The Irishman.
I think I saw something on Reddit where people were actually like splitting it into like 3 individual films, like you watch it in 3 parts.
Yeah, that would have been great.
But I wanted to ask, do you feel like that sort of air of pretentiousness comes down to like his films as well, where he's kind of like, if you're gonna watch one of my films, you're gonna sit down for 3 hours and you're gonna sit and you're gonna watch my film.
It has a James Cameron feel to it a little bit, where it's like Cameron being like, I'm so good, you're gonna sit for all 3 hours, you're gonna like every goddamn minute, and I'm like,
I'm gonna clip that.
Three. Please do.
Time code 25 minutes.
Yes. I really do feel that is Scorsese a bit, is his but I think he tends to use it better than Cameron does, but that's a different discussion. But nonetheless, that aside, The Departed is probably my favorite Scorsese.
Okay.
I love The Departed. I also love Hugo, but two very different
I haven't seen Hugo.
sides of the spectrum. I love Hugo because of what it does for the concept of talking about film. I don't think it's a better story than The Departed, but I have a lot of love for it. I think The Departed is my favorite.
Gotcha.
And I think the issue with when I watch Infernal Affairs, right? I've sat with The Departed for years. Like, I've sat with The Departed and the twists that I associate with The Departed, not Infernal Affairs. It's like hearing, we talked about, I think you and I talked about this off mic with Dune. It's like hearing, oh yeah, Dune came out before Star Wars, but then watching Dune and being like, this is just Star Wars. And it's like, well, no, it's not, but you saw it before. Oh, come on. Yeah. Like
it's kind of a disassociation, right? And it's also like the lack of credit and awareness at times. So if you look at when Departed won the Oscar, it was announced as a Japanese movie, and it's not. It's from Hong Kong. And like for that to be a mistake when you won the Oscar, it's like, what are we doing here? Or if you look at the credits in The Departed, like the fact that it's not an original screenplay is mentioned like tucked deep in the credits. It's not like first thing like based off the Infernal Affairs screenplay.
Interesting.
So it's stuff like that where it's like, do we as a country give credit where it's fucking due? No, we don't.
No, absolutely not.
And so therefore now you have a whole generation that thinks, oh, we're the fucking best, and like we do all this stuff where it's like half your shit is copied.
Yeah.
The best shit.
You're absolutely right. And so Zane, I'm curious with you. You bring both of these films here. If you had to pick one,
Infernal Affairs is better.
There we go.
Okay, so it's two versus one, and let's end the podcast
there are, you know, I think Nav kind of mentioned and alluded to this too, is there are things that each film does better than the other.
Yeah.
As an overall,
I firmly agree.
As an overall, I think that Infernal Affairs is better, but I love The Departed. And I think that there are some scenes, and it could just be culture, right? Like if I look at, there's the scene, the golf scene is a really funny one that I think of. The golf scene in Infernal Affairs is dramatized, but it's way fucking funnier in The Departed. Yeah. And so I enjoy it more in that scene because of the way that when he's talking to
Baldwin.
When Baldwin is talking to Matt Damon, and he's like, marriage is good, you know.
Yeah.
People know you're not a homo, or women see the ring, they know you must have cash, and your cock must work. You know, like all that shit. It was so much funnier, and I'm sure a huge part of it is like our American culture, where we find vulgar shit like that just kind of funny, right?
Well, it adds a little bit of
over the top. Yeah, it's over the top, but 100%. Or like some of the decisions made in the movie that are different, right? Like Sergeant Dignam, who we'll get to, that was a great addition. If I think of like the way that they combined roles to create a different character via Farmiga's psychiatrist, that's different. So some of those changes, good. Other changes, I enjoyed more. You know, or other original aspects I enjoyed more. Yeah. So
I think that's
we'll get into all that.
I think that that's one of the really interesting things when we come to the conversation of adaptation, right? Like, because you've got remakes and you've got like adaptations as well. We talk about books that get turned to things, and people talk about shows and all that kind of stuff. And one of the big things that comes up is, things, for example, like casting, right? Where it's a different race or a different gender or whatever, and people aren't like too happy with that. But one thing that comes up in conversation a lot of the time, which I think is relevant to this conversation, is like the actual like heart and soul of the story or the character. Is that right? Like, if you're adapting something and you're adapting it well, that's what's coming through. And I think that The Departed does justice as an adaptation as well. Like,
Yes.
I think it's really interesting that you were saying that they kind of like hiding away the fact that it was adapted and trying to almost present it like an original story. But like, it is in tone, some scenes that are like, shot for shot taken from the other film.
One thing that I noticed in a recent rewatch, and maybe it's in my head, but I felt that the music had similarities too, even though it's totally different cultures.
I didn't pick up on that, but
I think
yeah.
that it had similar, like they put music in similar spots,
Yeah.
and with what I would guess would be the similar intention.
Yeah.
But also maybe that's also part of when I first watched The Departed. I'm shipping up to Boston. That song, absolutely, just stuck with me for that film. Like just the just like when it has that, it just has this drive that I think, and Scorsese does this well with his films, of putting music in it that's like that. It gives me everything I need to get into the scene.
Yeah,
because I'm like, I no song conveys the scenery better than the way that song.
I mean, but that's also like one of the quintessential Boston songs.
Exactly. It's but not only that, it has the drive. Like, it not only is it exemplified, it does what it wants you to do. Like, it's a meta almost song.
Yeah. I wanted to add to that another thing the film does really well in its use of music is in the edit, and how it like harsh cuts music off between scenes, and kind of like you're getting those scenes, for example, of Leo doing some crazy shit and playing that song, and then it just hard cuts to Matt Damon knocking on a door and being a policeman, and you're kind of like, it's doing a great job of showing you how different these worlds are.
With that as well, like going to Infernal Affairs, a couple things I really loved about Infernal Affairs, that because I feel the same way that you guys did. I think that it's kind of a coin flip depending on what we're talking about that goes with it. And I totally understand why people like this movie. There's a lot of stuff that I like about The Departed that they added that I was like, okay, I think I might. And also maybe it's just because I have attachment to the cast and stuff like that, where I'm like, I really like this cast. So it's one of those things of, it's also, I've sat with The Departed for a long time. So it's kind of,
I think that The Departed,
my bias was going to be there.
The Departed did a really good job of making the big bad in Jack Nicholson, the mob boss, being this evil fucking dude, right?
Oh yeah.
If you look at some of the scenes, so I'll go over some behind the scenes stuff that maybe you guys don't know.
Awesome.
Matt Damon has talked about one of the opening scenes. You know this, right? Where Jack Nicholson pretty much rewrites the scene where the script is just like, hey, he's gonna shoot this person. Do you know what I'm talking about, Naf?
Nope.
Right at the opening, the mob boss, Jack Nicholson, he kills off this woman, and he says, "Gee, she fell funny," and the scene is kind of like that. I don't even think that was in the scene, but he's adding these very sinister overtones to explain all this stuff to really give you a sense of, holy shit, this guy is fucking evil. Because if you say that she fell funny, that means that you've killed a lot of people in your life.
Yeah.
And all the things that come with that. And then if you go further into the movie, again, representing just how big bad this person is, I think when you look at when he's talking to his mole in Infernal Affairs, when he tells him, hey, I need this information, the mob boss is just kind of like, hey, all right, no problem, here you go. Jack Nicholson is like, who the fuck do you think you are? You work for me.
Yeah.
and just that reminder of like I'm in fucking charge, right? So all these elements that I think that part, I agree that The Departed did that part better.
I think led to the issue I felt like the interesting thing with Infernal Affairs, and this is where I kind of go, okay, this is where to me they also essentially tried to take the same theme, but they both had a very interesting way of looking at it. I was surprised that the scene in The Departed is like in the midway point of the movie of them sort of realizing we have a rat in both crews, where it's like that is done
Right
as
away.
as like the inciting incident
Yeah.
in Infernal Affairs.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's really interesting because that means to me that Infernal Affairs is saying the goal isn't whether or not we take down the mob boss. The goal is to find the rat. That's where it's like that is the story. The mob boss is almost inconsequential to the story,
Yeah.
as opposed to The Departed, where literally, I mean, I guess in both films they start off with the mob boss, but Jack Nicholson starts the film in The Departed. He is just as much a central character of that story as Leo and Matt. And what I love about his use in there, and this is why I tend to lean to Departed, is his sense of fear. The fear that he instills in DiCaprio and Damon, both, kind of gives the film stakes in a different way. Here's one of the things I think the Infernal Affairs does infinitely better than The Departed. I think they're two very different characters, how they're portrayed. I prefer Tony Leung to Leo in the leading roles.
I wanted to talk about this a little bit because it's also one of the things that I think watching Infernal Affairs first, there are scenes that obviously like match and there are scenes that are different. And I think particularly one of the scenes that I just really, really preferred was the use of basically that sequence with the cast. At the start of the film, you see Leo's character punch someone in the face and then he breaks his hand and he gets the cast on. And if I remember correctly, I don't think you see that in Infernal Affairs. He's just got a cast.
He just has it.
And we know who he is. And the film sets it up as he's there. Where would he hide the wire? Perfect place for it. Nobody's going to do it. And so this whole sequence is so tense because you think he's hiding and they're talking Morse code and he's tapping the thing. And it's perfect setup for then the mob boss to come in and smash the cast because he knows, right? He's like, he knows what we know. Smashes the cast, looks at Tony Leung's character and is like, yo, like basically gets the feeling that he's the rat. And then it's not until afterwards that the camera pans away and you see the microphone on the outside of the glass. And I was
brilliant.
This guy is so fucking smart. Where at that point, like, Leo's character is already heavily affected by drugs and like all that kind of stuff. So he's kind of not as switched on as he is in Infernal Affairs. And I loved the juxtaposition of those two scenes because in that film, you've got everyone has got their cell phones turned off, but there's one switched on. So you kind of like, ooh, it's almost like I'm going, this is not a smart play, Leo. You're going to get busted. But Tony Leung's character was just chess. He was playing chess. But I did love how they still played on the fact that if you'd seen Infernal Affairs and you were expecting that smashing of the cast moment, you still get that in The Departed in a different context.
In a very different way.
And it is still a brilliant scene. Like, it's very intense. Like, do you know who
I don't
like a little funny.
Yeah, because I don't think it's brilliant because there's no way that you're going to make me believe that a highly trained undercover is going to break because he's getting the shit kicked out of him and be like, yeah, I'm the rat. Like, oh, I give up. Like, that's not going to happen. So while I get that it's meant to scare you, I found that as a bit of a flaw and kind of like, really like, was this scene necessary?
Yeah.
Did we really need it? We could have established it differently. And to your point, for all the credit of like Tony Leung's character being just a freaking, like playing chess, it shows a bit more in that sense.
Yeah. Okay, I get that.
Going back,
Well, I will rebuttal on the one thing, 'cause I don't think that was the sole goal of the scene with Nicholson. In that scene, keeping in mind one of the main points that Jack Nicholson hits home is 2 points, which is that the people that Leo tuned up are going to come and get him unless he stops them. So he's basically saying, I am top dog here, just so we're clear. And then one of the other points he says is, are you going to keep doing coke deals with your drophead cousin?
sure.
Like,
I mean, this is
so,
what
like, the more thing is, to me, I took that scene as him not only vetting him for that, because I mean, ultimately he's not going to break and say I'm the rat, right? But he is going to have that moment of basically
I'm
like,
the boss.
are you going to stop doing this? I will keep hitting this until you tell me you're not going to, and trust me, this is not going to be how I come back next time.
This is where the films diverge, right? Because if you look at Infernal Affairs, we know that Tony Leung has been undercover for like 7 years, I think, right?
Exactly.
Whereas we don't really have an exact timeline, or if we do, of like the whole totality of the movie, we don't know how long it's actually been, right? And really, we're seeing the inception of him coming into the gang, whereas we know that in Infernal Affairs, he was raised into it. He was a kid,
You're
more
seeing
or less, right?
You're seeing a veteran of the gang versus a
Right.
newbie, which
Right.
is a very different way that the films, which I personally like the newbie approach, even though I prefer Tony Leung.
So
because I love those kind of characters.
Keegs, we talk about I'm gonna come to your point as well. My two credits, but Keegan, we talk a lot about how we're obsessed with like what's the word? Oh my god! Like when people are good at their job. Like I love watching
competency boners.
Competency boners. That's what I was looking for. And Tony Leung's character in Infernal Affairs is precisely that. He is just...
You're absolutely right.
He is so good. And I love that. And it's like you were saying, we gotta kind of get that with Leo because it is a different character and different point of view. But what were you saying before, Zane?
So, for me, the reason why I like Infernal Affairs better is the crux of the movie is the theme. The Chinese title of Infernal Affairs, it goes to reference the realm of Avicii, hell, and it's considered the lowest level of hell. And if you tie that into the ending of the movie, where if you look at Matt Damon's character, he is not a good person. He's a self-serving prick. That's what he is. And he is relieved to be done with everything and that he didn't get caught. Whereas if you look at the ending of Infernal Affairs, the guy is in continuous hell because he has to live with this guilt of everything that has gone down. And that is, to me, what the movie is about. Whereas The Departed is totally different. And it frames the whole conversation very differently with how it ends.
Wow.
So to me, that is a big proponent of why I think Infernal Affairs is better, because it's stuck to the theme and the concept of continuous hell.
And I think that even when you move the title to, like when you I suppose translate, for lack of a better term, the title to an American, an English phrase, I actually wanted to talk about this as well, because I think that like Infernal Affairs is such a cool fucking name for a film.
Oh yeah.
It is
because when I first heard the movie, I was like, why isn't it called Internal Affairs? Like that makes more sense, right? But then I found out what it fucking means, and I'm like, oh.
And you talking about
really
the Chinese title for it, I'm like, it fits that same theme as well. You know, infernal, it's hell. It's like, I'm like, dude, this is clever on so many levels. But I actually thought it was called Internal Affairs for ages. So when I was looking at it on Letterboxd to try and like find the film to write a review for it, I couldn't find it. And it wasn't until I went and Googled like Tony Leung remake of The Departed, blah, blah, that I was like, oh, it's Infernal.
Exactly. And that was kind of where hold on one second. That was one of the things, and I will say, as a person who does believe I like The Departed more than Infernal Affairs, Infernal Affairs is a much better title. The Departed, I still look at it and I'm like, I don't think this was the right title for this film. Like
Though-
like not in the wrong way. Like it's not a bad title by any means. But it doesn't have the same
It feels like
impact.
yeah.
It feels like it's like saying Whiplash. You know, like Whiplash as like a title in that film.
Another great movie, by the way.
Another phenomenal movie, yeah. But in Whiplash, it's like, yeah, I guess that's the name. Like it's not like it's a very interesting thing for me with The Departed, because with The Departed, my feeling with it was that you very much have this sense of the way that film goes. And I will go to, I think with the ending, it's very different. Obviously, as you pointed out,
and
Zane.
it gives the film a different like context as well. Like it
And,
as Zane was
different
saying,
meaning.
it frames it differently. And one of the things that I'm not sure you were going to touch on this, Keeks, but like it's interesting that when we talk about the titles, the different context that it gives the film, because The Departed is focusing on like it's like
The dead.
Exactly. Also, did you guys feel that there was a very specific nod to, hey, this is the title of our film in the film? Like when Matt Damon's sitting there and he's like, so what do we know about him?
What was his name? The Departed.
The Departed. And then it just kind of like stops for a minute, and I was like, oh, that's the name of the movie.
It's that Cinema Sins roll credits
Exactly, yeah.
like moment of
Yeah.
like that's the feeling that I have with it, where I look at it and I'm just like, I agree with you there. I think that the it's not the best, name for the film, or like
Podlines are
not
in
the
chat.
best
Hey,
way of
Podlines.
going about it. Yep, welcome in, and General Kenobi, and so with it, the issue with The Departed, but they also kind of did a good job at the beginning, being like, and all the faithful departed, like, that they had that sort of thing happen at the very beginning, which I think made ultimately, when Matt Damon says it, it doesn't stand out as like in your face. Because Matt Damon is already, it's already been said, so it's not him being the first one to mention it. But you are right. It does have a moment of feeling like, oh, okay. But I do feel with The Departed, one thing I really do like about it is I like its kind of, I do like Jack Nicholson's line, which they kind of do in Infernal Affairs. Like it's kind of like a little bit of where the film difference, where it's the idea of, in my day, they told us we can be cops or criminals. Today, I ask you this: when you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference?
There are some killer lines in this film, some iconic lines.
Mm-hmm. Also, what needs to absolutely be said is Mark Wahlberg has some of the fucking best lines in this goddamn film.
Well, that actually brings me to
Yes.
something that I'd love to get both of your opinions on. So the opening of Infernal Affairs, of course, happens much quicker, much snappier. Kind of opens with a flashback, and then it kind of cuts together everything, and then it's like, okay, boom, we're off.
Yeah, you're waiting like what 15, 20 minutes for the title in
Yeah.
Departed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a slow build, yeah.
But I wanted to talk about the differences between the scenes in particularly when our mole is established. So like with Leo's character, that scene with Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg is brutal. It is like Mark Wahlberg is destroying Leo that whole time. And with Infernal Affairs, it felt more like a, hey, this is the right path for you because of what we know, and you can do a lot of good here for us. But in The Departed, it's almost like, fuck you, you suck, you're not going to be a good cop, this is what I have for you, you're pissed to me, I don't care.
But is that what he's saying in that scene?
Well, I think it shows with Martin Sheen's character. he does care for Leo's character. Like you can see that like they're very different. Like polar opposite. It is kind of like a good cop, bad cop. But like Mark Wahlberg's character is so disconnected from the people and just interested in like the job and the what's the word? Like the case that he's kind of like I don't care about you. Like and
So
it is a very
Wahlberg has
different
said that he built the Dignam character around his experiences of being arrested and his dealings with Boston cops growing up. And so he created this persona of like, these are my experiences, this is what cops were like. So I'm gonna make this character like that. Just this total jackass, basically.
Well,
You know?
and but in to that
A-cap.
point, I think that we're also forgetting some things about his character, because every time I watch this film, I forget it until it happens. Dignam is actually a much more complex character than I think we give him credit for, other than the funny, hard ass. Dignam, when Dignam comes onto the screen, like as you said, Neff, let's go with that opening like scene with him. He's talking with these, he's saying, how fucked up are you? And he's basically like, I'm going to tell you something. I know what you are and I know what you're not. And I'll tell you something right now. You're no cop. But then when you see this conversation shift, the point of Dignam is trying to make, in my mind, is he's trying to basically get through Leo's head. Here's the thing. If you want to be an actual cop, like an actual cop, the cop that we need, because we don't need you, as they say, do you want to, like, Martin Sheen says the great line, which it's like, do you want to be a real cop or do you want to look like a cop? And it's like, and basically him saying like, a lot of guys just want the badge and the guns and have their name on TV. Like, that's what they want.
Well, going into what you're saying, I mean, it directly relates to his line where he says, you want to serve the Commonwealth, this is how you do it, right? Like,
exactly.
This is something that only you can do. And this is your purpose. Are you ready to fulfill it?
Well, and it's the point of basically like what I think that he was trying to get across to Leo is basically like, you grow up in Southie, right? This is all of the reasons why we're talking to you and not kicking you out of here,
Yeah.
And that's what I found so intriguing about his character. And that's why when people say, oh, he's just a hard ass, he's just this. No, I think it's a lot more subtle than that, which is why I think the character stands out so much. Is he's the guy who's no bullshit, but he's also the one that's fully on Leo's side as to when other people are saying shit about him. It's kind of like the your older brother able to make fun of you, but if other people make fun of you, like you're dead. It's my opinion is that I think that Dignam kind of exists in this space to be that essentially how do you put it? Like when people are asking for the identity of undercover informants, it's like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. If he was this kind of uncaring asshole, why wouldn't he? Why would he have that? Like, it's Ken comes in again with a killer, which is The Departed is just the Wolf of Wall Street in soft mode. And like it's cable version of Wolf of Wall Street. But my feeling on it is more just I feel that that's a very interesting part that Mark Wahlberg brings to this character. And I don't know if you guys got the same way, but at least that's what resonated with me with this guy, where it's like him doing this. He also has some of my favorite lines of like that scene when he's just talking to Alec Baldwin in the beginning, where he's just like, where it's like, unfortunately this unit has more leaks than the Iraqi Navy, and then like then him just saying, go fuck yourself. Oh, I'm tired from fucking your wife. Like,
Yeah.
How's your mother? Good.
Yeah.
Tired from fucking my father.
Yeah.
And just like,
It's
and just
like,
having that whole moment of my opinion on feds is they're like mushrooms, feed them shit and keep them in the dark. You all have a nice day. Like, he kind of has a Roy Kent vibe a little bit.
he
That's fair.
he
That's fair.
provides some levity in the film, definitely too. And like needed, when it's like it's pretty like dark subject matter here. You've got like one.
Oh yeah.
But it's such a great premise for a film, just in general. Like,
Same.
We have
Yeah, I
two
agree.
people that are trying to find, and the way that they cross paths constantly. Even the fact that in this big wide world, they're both sleeping with the same woman. Just to add to that, the layers of like these guys are. One guy is bad pretending to be good, and one is good pretending to be bad. Like, it's complex. I love it.
It's such an interesting thing, right? Like, because
And they're both
even
desperate
the
to not get
concept that
caught. It's just tension.
well, and they're both, and that's to me the tension I didn't feel as much in Infernal Affairs.
It's funny you say
Like-
that, because when I was thinking of some sequences, I was actually just thinking that I was like, particularly the stakeout sequence in general, I felt a lot more tension in Infernal Affairs than I did The Departed.
Okay, well, the stakeout at that beginning scene, yes, I agree. But like all of the other scenes, like the scene with like Costello at the restaurant, when it's like, why didn't you stay when I asked to get your numbers? When he has the whole scene where he's drawing and he's like, he has also one of the goddamn best deliveries. Like almost borderlining on ridiculous from Jack Nicholson of see, Will, I got this rat, this cheese eating, gnawing fucking rat.
Yeah.
And it brings up questions. And it's just this moment of just going, I felt so much tension in that scene of
Yeah.
like, I really I would say, like, I agree with you. The stakeout scene in the beginning is better in Infernal. I would also say the elevator sequence in Infernal is better. Like that,
Yeah.
I would say they're equal, but I would lean towards Infernal if you pressured me into it.
I don't know if it came from having like knowing where the story was going, but things like, for example, the boss being thrown off the roof. Like in Infernal Affairs, I was like, oh my god. But it didn't hit me as hard in The Departed. I was like, even like Leo's reaction, he just kind of goes up to him and he's just like, damn. And like Infernal Affairs.
One thing about Infernal Affairs, and this
The
is a very
slow-mo,
2000s. This is
yeah.
a very 2000s thing. They heavily hinted in my mind. Tony Leung fucking loved that man. They had a passionate romance,
dude.
Like they had this moment where the way that it's like, it did all of the flashbacks, and you're hearing the Chinese woman singing in the background, and it's just this like, oh, like just sort of seeing like the two of them. I'm almost imagining them cutting to them. He's like, it was a birthday gift, It was like this whole thing there. I'm like, they are really putting some LGBTQIA,
Happy
undertones
Pride.
in this. And
Yeah.
Happy Pride, Tony. Happy Pride.
I wanted to ask Zane as well, like, particularly like throughout the film, obviously there's lots of moments that are designed to pull on the heartstrings, that are designed to kind of build a lot of tension. And I think that, to Keegan's point, Jack Nicholson has a very different take on the character than what exists in Infernal Affairs. There's one sequence in Infernal Affairs that I loved, which is when they've actually got the boss in questioning, and he's just kind of sitting there eating his food, like, fuck you, I'm going to be out shortly. Like, you guys have nothing.
That was good.
You have nothing. He kind of has... He doesn't feel unpredictable, and I think that's what gives Jack Nicholson kind of the edge, like, literally, because you don't really know what he's going to do. But I wanted to ask, there's that same scene that Keys was talking about. He steps out of frame and then just randomly pops back in. He's like, I forgot my cigarettes. And he's just so uncomfortable. That had to not have been scripted.
So I think that there's more autonomy in American films. And then when you have a name like Jack Nicholson, you have more freedom to kind of implement your own thoughts. So going to that scene, the one that Keeg was talking about, what you're referencing, one of the things that you may not know is Jack Nicholson brought a real gun as a prop. So if you look at Leo's eyes,
It's not smart.
he's fucking
in a film with
terrified.
Alec Baldwin.
So Leo in that scene
was gonna say
where
the same
he's
thing.
accusing him of like being a rat, Leo's fucking terrified because he's like, "Holy shit, this is a real gun. What the fuck am I supposed to
That's
do?"
that's gonna be my
But it
Fellowship of
adds
the
to the
Ring trivia moment there, where we're gonna be watching it with people all the time. And I'm gonna be like, "That's a real gun." It's like that time. Oh, he actually threw the knife at Vigo, and he had to block
Yeah.
it. Like,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
insane. How did they let
It's
that
like-
happen? That
No,
should not have been allowed.
No, Jack Nicholson asked for it, but said don't tell Leo, and they greenlit it, and so yeah, that's how that happened.
So was there
That
meant to
makes
be
more
a gun
sense.
in the scene always?
It was meant to
No.
just be, yeah. I don't think the gun was supposed to be there.
Because you kind of get
But he
that
wanted
vibe
to
in the
add it.
film too, where they're just kind of talking, and then all of a sudden, like I had almost thought maybe Leo had his gun under the table and he dropped it, and then Jack Nicholson picked it up and used it. That was sort of the vibe I got in the film at the start, but then I was like, no, I don't think that's it.
It goes back to kind of what we mentioned earlier, where it's like the mob boss is much more of a powerful element in The Departed than he is in Infernal Affairs.
Well, I think
and-
it's also in the. Oh, sorry. Continue saying. I'll finish my point afterwards.
No, I'm blanking now. I don't know where else we were going with this.
We were talking about how they
like you were talking about the fact that they were a powerhouse. One thing I also think The Departed did in a very interesting way, and I think maybe this might get the train of thought back on there, was the fact that in The Departed they really leaned into almost the Godfatherian like landscape of crime families that exist in Boston. At this time. They're like, go ahead.
Unrelated, but one of the things that is a great little Easter egg of The Departed is they borrowed heavily from the X marks the spot concept.
Yes, from
And
Scarface.
it's from Scarface, and it's basically anytime if you're looking at the scenery in the background, anytime you see an X, that character is fucking dead. Like that is your sign of like this character's gonna die.
Like for example, if you notice behind Leo in the airport, the columns
everywhere.
that are like kind of the support beams
Huh.
of the airport are a giant X.
That's
Yeah.
fucking awesome.
Um,
I didn't notice any
so
of that.
I think
Yeah, you don't until like you know it, and then it's like
Yeah.
shit.
Was it in Scarface?
Yeah.
Was it something like if there's an orange in the scene or something like that? Or is it the
No,
same?
that's
It's
the
like-
Godfather, I think.
Okay.
yeah.
You're thinking Godfather because they did that with Breaking Bad as well. Like
Mm.
Breaking Bad did that. But in Scarface, the original, I don't know if they did it in the Brian De Palma version, but in the original Scarface, X's always represented essentially. It's a slow burning thing to like that. Once you start realizing X's started, like there's at one point one of the distinct ones I remember in that movie was somebody rolls a bowling ball and gets a strike.
Huh.
And it's that X there when, and I don't even think that they even show the death, but you just know with that was, it was really like an interesting thing where
Subtlety.
I was like, no, I love it.
I think one thing that you guys hinted at earlier was when the captain dies and you see the emotion. I think that the whole concept of being two-faced, two personas, it's heavily emphasized on the mental toll it takes on these characters for both of them. Whereas in The Departed, you mostly only see it for the mole in the triad, the police officer, the undercover cop. You see it weighing on him with Billy Costigan, with Leo's character. You don't see so much with Matt Damon's character because he's just living his fucking life. Like, all is good.
I'm gonna disagree with that one a little bit, not to the same degree,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that they both kind of are
One can't
have
get a
the
hard on.
easier job. Yeah, like exactly. You know,
Say that again, Naf.
I said one of them can't get a hard on. Like Matt, that's that part early. I had a thought on hard ons. It is related.
Here we go.
If you are experiencing that yourself, what should you do? Just notes for a friend. Oh, no, I'm kidding. I just thought this, and I wasn't thinking it during the film. At the end, you've got Matt Damon's character trying to talk to his wife who's crying at Jack's funeral. And obviously, like, you know, that she was, you know, cheating on him the whole time, like with somebody else. But I hadn't really considered at all for a second that the baby could have been Jack's, and probably.
Are you talking about Jack as in Jack from
Uh,
Titanic, not Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, I am. That the baby could have been Leo's. I'm sorry, and not actually
Academy
Matt
Award
Damon's.
winner Leonardo DiCaprio, and you're referring to him as Jack Dawson.
I'm
from
sorry. I'm
Titanic.
sorry.
Unfucking
I think it's because
That-
in the
that's
corner of
awesome.
my eye,
in a film with Jack Nicholson.
in the corner
God
of my
damn it,
eye,
Matt.
I've got Kenny going, Jack being Jack is always a win, and Jack being Jack, Jack loves being a method actor, and I'm just like, Jack. But
See, whereas I never believed that it was Matt Damon's baby. I always thought that it was.
it makes
Leo's.
sense to me now. But
Yeah,
while I
same.
was watching it, it didn't actually click to me that I'm like, this man can't get hard. How is he going to impregnate you? And now I'm like, wow,
Now that's
that was a
not.
Leo baby.
It's
Wow.
also interesting with Matt Damon because I want to talk about Matt Damon's character for a bit in the comparison in the two films because I think that this is one of the bigger, as similar as they are. I think they're as you point out, saying there are distinct differences.
Mhm.
I am much more scared of the Infernal Affairs character
Mm.
than I am Matt Damon's,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but I hate Matt Damon's infinitely more
Yeah.
than the Infernal Affairs one. Like
Like-
Matt Damon does a great job because I tend to love Matt Damon, whatever he's in. Like I tend to love him as an actor. So to get a role where I really fucking hate you, like in this movie,
Yeah.
not in like a way I think he does a bad job or anything like that, but like it's the
No, I
correct
get you, yeah.
response to the character.
It's the Jack Gleason
Like-
effect. It's like you hate Joffrey. Like,
Yeah,
You
it's
hate
like
him.
you hate him,
I
and it's like
I think that one of the things that was really interesting about that as well was that in Infernal Affairs with that Matt Damon character, I felt a lot more fear for him that he was going to get exposed, and I felt that tension throughout the whole film. That I didn't want him to get found out.
Yeah.
Where the way they present Matt Damon's character is, yeah, like you do kind of not like him as much, and you're kind of rooting for Leo to win. But I think that one thing that Infernal Affairs did really well for me, particularly, is it's that warrior thing. I'm like, I care about both of these characters, even though one is arguably good and one is less good. Like, I don't know who I want to win.
Interesting.
In The Departed, I felt pretty clear that I was like, I want Leo to come out the other side. Okay, which spoilers.
like that was the thing.
So
with
do-
it,
when-
that
when
think okay, go ahead, Zane. Just go
No,
ahead.
no, no. I was just gonna say, when you guys both watched The Departed, did you think that obviously, okay, the movie's gone on for this long, like it's gonna be over soon. Did you think that he was gonna get away with it?
I mean, yeah, like especially having watched Infernal Affairs, I was like, that's where it's going. I will say that I think both films handle the shock of the mole
Yes.
being killed perfectly. And it is brilliant in The Departed as well. But The Departed hits like, for lack of a better word, it almost like does that.
Well, when you say mole, you mean the undercover cop.
Undercover cop, yeah. That's what I
Okay,
meant,
okay.
sorry.
Okay.
But I think that one of the things that happens in The Departed for me, which kind of like the scene starts very, very well, but in Infernal Affairs, the tension is like in the, oh my god, there's like somebody else here that is like me, and then, you know, we got to stick together and blah, blah, whatever. But in Departed, it's kind of like, all right, he gets shot. Cool. And then he gets shot. And then he gets shot. And then he gets shot. And I was kind of like, it's almost funny now that people are just dropping dead all of a sudden, which I don't, if I recall correctly, doesn't happen as much in Infernal Affairs. It kind of like, the scene happens, and then it's kind of like,
Well, they
we're
added
all-
a character in Infernal Affairs.
yeah. It's
Oh,
like,
I'm
we're all
sorry. They
uncom-
added a character in The Departed, not in Infernal
Yeah.
Affairs. Like in Infernal Affairs, that was an interesting difference to me.
Hmm.
I preferred The Departed because I thought it was more shocking.
Yeah.
Was
It's like,
when
oh my
we
god.
get to the point where he shoots him, it's like, well, of course this guy was also one of, like, I mean, like, I mean, I also knew with The Departed kind of where it was most likely going, but I was like, I like in The Departed that if you have not seen Infernal Affairs, when you're watching it the first time, seeing the other cop, I'm blanking on his name, but like the African American cop coming in, and he's in there. I'm blanking on the actor's name, but
It's
like,
Lewis from Kangaroo Jack.
Well, he's also in Transformers in the first one, and that's what I remember him as. Is that,
Hey, the whole damn plate.
The whole plate. It's just so
You're talking about Brown, right? Not Barrington. You're talking about Brown.
Brown, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but when you see him in that, like, you have that moment where you have this moment where the audience believes Leo's going to get out of this because this other guy's there, and they have that great line where it's you know me, and he says, maybe I do, but right now you need to drop the gun. Like, it's just a great emotional beat in that scene that's not there in Infernal Affairs, where the audience is almost lured into a false sense of security of this is, at least that's how I was when I first saw this story. Because obviously in Infernal Affairs, I know what's going to happen, so I didn't know how well that would translate either way. But what I felt with this one was that watching it, I felt this sense of, oh, they're going to get out of this. And then you have that moment where you have Matt Damon being like, oh, I'm really excited to see you explain this, that this is going to be fun. Like, and you really see this guy's veneer start to drop as the elevator goes down and down.
Yeah.
And down. And it's
Just
this moment of him going,
me.
just kill me. Because that's going to be a better death than me being living up to what has been said.
But Leo's line is perfect because he's like, I am killing you.
I am killing
that
you.
That was awesome.
That was a great line.
Phenomenal scene.
Yeah.
It's like, and when you have that moment of then he gets shot by the guy that has been with Matt Damon the whole time. I thought that was a really great turn on what Infernal Affairs did, because it's more shocking. Because it's like, where was this guy? Where was this guy? Like, and it's like, but it makes sense. And you go, shit, of course it was him. Like, like,
for me, I
feel it made sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting, and it kind of gets you questioning, like, all right, when did like Jack Nicholson's character like kind of get this guy? I liked the feeling of Infernal Affairs, it being kind of like almost like a random person, like it's not like he's around, because that kind of then made me think, who else? And I think it does the same for the character too, because it's like, it's not just the two guys that were partners that didn't know that both of them were working together, or it seems that one knew, like that guy knew about Matt Damon, but Matt Damon didn't know about him. Like, it seems like that, but in Infernal Affairs, I think it adds to that feeling of like that personal hell that you have to live with, because now he's like, they're everywhere. Like, I thought it was just me. They are everywhere. And I didn't get that feeling as much from Matt Damon's version of it, because he just shoots him straight away afterwards as well. And he's like, okay, cool, I'm moving on with my life.
Yeah. Well, but I did feel, and this is also different because I'll tell you how I felt, like, only knowing this story from seeing The Departed first. Because I felt that was that moment of like, well, now Matt Damon has that upper hand and that control, but the fact that it was this kind of bang, 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 it's just you are, as an audience member, going like, whoa, 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 whoa,
yeah.
whoa, like so much is happening.
They tried to do a scene like that at the end of Amsterdam, and it was very bad.
But like, I think that The Departed does it really well, where it's like, of course Matt Damon's going to take this guy out. He can't trust this fucking guy. Like, he's going to take that guy out as he can, because I'm not going to put my life in the hands of somebody like that.
Yeah.
And what I felt with when you look at this, what I think with The Departed, I think that you're right. In Infernal Affairs, it does make you go, there were a lot of these guys at that beginning scene. Where are the rest? I think it also explains why, to me, there are more of the Infernal Affairs movies than with The Departed.
That makes sense.
Because I'm like, it kind of feels like a John Wick moment, almost a little bit of like there are a lot of people that could
Yeah.
kind of go from there. And I also like
wanna-
that with The Departed, it's open ended at the end.
I wanted to throw over to Zane as well, because I know that you were trying to get a point in there, and we kind of went off on our own side conversation. But what were you thinking?
I was going to tell you guys that there is an alternate ending to Infernal Affairs. So in mainland China, because the movie was brought over there as well, you cannot have stuff that insinuates a win for the triads or like propaganda can be deemed as that. And the ending of Infernal Affairs, because he survives, it is deemed as a yes, there's an interpretation of he's living in this continuous hell, but there's also a way to interpret it as the bad guys fucking won.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't have that in mainland China. So in the alternate ending that was ported to China, he is actually, when he comes down from the elevator and he reveals his badge that, hey, I'm a cop, a new unit comes in and they arrest him on the spot and they walk away, and that's the ending.
Huh. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't
yeah.
either.
Like, but it is there.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to ask.
but that and I think for me, like, that's again why I tie into, as I stated earlier, like the reason why I like IA more than Departed is that theme of Buddhism and continuous hell and what all that means, because there are things that people go through in their life where you're stuck in this vicious cycle of just your own personal hell. And
Correct.
if you look at these characters, you have the mole saying from the start, when the undercover cop is kicked out of the academy and is asked who wants to trade places with him, and he says on the spot, I do, because I don't want this, you know.
Yeah.
And then that's perpetuated at the end too, where it's like, you know. And so to me, that theme will always stick with me, and to me, I think that, however much other things that The Departed did well due to American culture or everything else, and the fact that it was not an original script and all that stuff, I just think that, like, yes, it did some things better, but it didn't stick to the actual theme of the movie, and for that reason, I'm out.
But I also then go, I think that this is where I go with remakes. I think remakes can have a different interpretation of a theme, because I don't think The Departed was ever trying to go for the continuous hell. I think, if anything, and I agree that, like, and again, I'm not trying to refute the fact that you like
the
one
character
more.
is different, right? Because like Matt Damon's character is self-serving. We see it constantly throughout.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even if you look at the elevator scene where he's talking to the psychiatrist, like, that is super self-serving. It's all about him. That isn't the case in Infernal Affairs. They're very different characters, even though they serve the same role.
I have a question on interpretation as well, once you're done with your point, Keeks.
Yes, just with it, well, just a quick thing there. Well, first off, to our people on TikTok, hello, guys. And so then, but with your point, I think that with Matt Damon, being a very self-serving character, and I think that with The Departed, I think the theme ultimately comes down to kind of that the bill comes due eventually. Like, it's a difficult thing to be like, okay, because it's like Matt Damon will do all these horrible things, but it's also like he is paying for it continuously. And I think in a different way than the guy in Infernal Affairs is, because he's constantly belittled by Jack Nicholson. I mean, you even hear it in the conversation he has on the phone, as you said, Naf, earlier, where it's that thing of going, he's like, yeah, I'll handle it. Like, like, you hear the hesitancy in his voice of, I don't want Jack Nicholson to be mad at me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want the repercussions of what that will mean.
Yeah.
You know? And
some of the dialogue with Jack Nicholson,
I think that's fascinating.
When he's talking to Matt Damon and being like, oh, so you moved in with that psychiatrist, then I'm going to get somebody else to do this to her. And I was like, oh my God, dude, savage. I wanted to ask on the ending with Officer Dingham being in Matt Damon's apartment.
Mhm.
It may be a dumb question, but I'm curious as to what your reads are on that scene. Like, what does that mean for Officer Dignam? Who is he? What is he? Like, why has he killed Matt Damon?
He knows. He knows that Matt Damon's the rat.
He's
I inferred it
resigned at this
as-
point, so obviously he's not a cop anymore.
He's doing vigilante justice, I think, at that point. Like I don't that's at least in my 2 cents with it, is that he's basically like, fuck you, I know what you did.
Yeah. What do you
Presumably
It could also be that the
Presumably-
psychiatrist gave him the tapes.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I could
like
see that.
Exactly.
we don't know that he wasn't seeing her as a patient. Like we don't know that, right?
Mhm.
For a fact, we don't know that. And she was in the department. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it.
I think I wasn't certain of this, and I was pretty sure that I was wrong. But then I remember in my initial watch, my initial reaction was like, "Wait, was he working for the bad guys too?" And he came back and like it was that. But I don't think it was that. But I was curious if you guys got that kind of vibe at all.
My-
I could see your interpretation of it that way. I thought it was. There are moments as like filmmakers, I feel like you want to give your audience something that's like, we asked them to sit through a lot. Let's give this character what he deserves. And it's that moment of who better than kind of the comedic ish relief that you kind of like this guy who's kind of been no bullshit the entire time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of does feel
that moment
deserved.
you
It's
see
like,
that shot, you're like, oh yeah, like you
Yeah.
just want
And
it,
even-
you know, like you just want that moment, and that moment where he just goes, okay, like
Yeah.
you know, like
Like,
it's just
he
it's like the
knew-
most pathetic line, but it's so good. He just kind of going, fine, like he has like the goddamn bag of groceries, and he's just like, fuck it, fine, like sure, go.
So I
You
have
know?
two questions on that.
Please.
From a filmmaker standpoint, one, what did you think of same scene? What did you think of when Matt Damon goes to pet the dog, or is it was
And
a
she
cat?
pulls
I
it
don't know.
away.
Yeah.
And like the neighbor's like, "Fuck you." What did you think of that? Because I feel like they're telling us something. Like everyone knows this guy's
Yeah.
a douchebag. That's
Yup.
how I interpreted it, right?
Yep.
And no one likes this guy, and so it's a reminder to the audience that like, hey, you're not supposed to be rooting for this guy,
Yeah.
right? And then two, the kind of a little too on the nose rat at the end. What did you think of that? Both of you guys.
I thought
It was
silly.
fine.
I thought it was silly. I was like, that it's not necessary.
It felt unnecessary, but it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm not going to hold it against it. I thought it was kind of like, I kind of also thought it is a little like not
You
cheeky.
think it was a little too cheesy?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was too cheesy.
And that's been one with the films, everybody. We're done. Like that's just. But that like to your point, Zane. I
wasn't a
think that-
setup, by the way. I wasn't trying to. It just kind of happened.
Oh, of course, I know. But it was just your creative instincts kicking in. But I really didn't like. I guess for me, it was one of those things where it was more like, of course, that's the last shot. Like to some degree, I go, of course.
Mhm.
I didn't need it, but also it makes sense that that's the last shot.
Mm.
You know, like it felt like if Martin Scorsese thought he was being subtle, it's like, okay,
No.
but it's like I don't think he thought he was being subtle. I think the point was to basically take a baseball bat and just go bam, symbolism, and just kind of go.
What about you?
You talking about it kind of reminds me of our conversation about Babylon and the ending of Babylon, and how some
Yeah.
people love that final sequence, and some people are just like, "Are you serious?" Like, bro.
Yeah,
And I think it's.
I think you and I both fall into the camp of "Are you serious?"
I've come around on Babylon's ending. I really want to watch it again.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
I remember I was sitting in the
Listen,
theater, and
Babylon's
every person that I was
Babylon's
with,
is 3/4 of a good movie.
Yeah, when I was in the theater, every person that I was around, like at the end, was kind of like, "Okay, we get it," and I was like, "Awesome." Until Avatar came on the screen.
That's what I go to every time I think about it. But but to your point, I think that with the rat thing, I think for me, I think it was more just I felt everything was so well done to that point that moment did feel like, okay, that was a choice.
Yeah.
Like like everything else has been, not that it's been subtle, but it's been more subtle than that. You know what I mean? Like,
there's something else I want to talk about in The Departed. Because if I remember correctly, it happens in both movies, so I think it's a callback to Infernal Affairs that they did it. But Infernal Affairs it kind of suits its style a little bit more. The pinhole transitions in The Departed feel so out of place. Like, where black screen and it like opens up or it closes.
It only happened once.
I thought twice.
I thought, does it happen twice in The Departed? I noticed the one.
Yeah, and I think Infernal Affairs opens with it as well. When he's like going,
Yeah.
I think it's the same sequence. He's going to the police headquarters and it like opens up, and I was like, okay. So I was like, oh, that's kind of sick. But I think I remember it happening again in The Departed later, in like some random scene, and I was just like,
it feels like a Tarantino move. You know, like how Tarantino will do weird things, like in Pulp Fiction, he'll be don't be a square, and you actually see the outline of the square, and it's like,
yeah.
Hold on.
There's a really great Australian comedy group that played on that joke a little bit, and the guy actually goes, Broden, you need to stop being such a cunt. And it's like, it's perfect because you're like,
good joke.
and they draw the square on the screen, and they're playing like slow jazz, so it's like, and then it just, you're like, whoa, whoa.
Like, whoa. Insert
Yeah.
David
Anyway,
Harper
sorry to my
just going,
Americans. I know you don't love that word, but in Australia, it's the same as saying hello.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I feel like you get away with it. But like the thing with, like, I guess Zane, question to you with that, because was there anything about The Departed in that regard? Like, because one thing that I felt like The Departed had a really good frenetic pace with, especially in the beginning, and it's very Scorsese, but it's that kind of like rapid cut beginning when you're hearing kind of like just, like the music's playing, and just it has that moment of just like, no one gives it to you. You have to take it. And you're seeing it intercut with this kind of archival footage, and you're seeing it kind of with this whole thing there. To the point where we also have that really gross scene with Jack Nicholson in the diner where he talks about like the guy, and he's like, don't make me come down for this again. And he talks about his daughter in front of him.
Yeah.
Like, and it's that moment of, I don't like some of the words you're using. I don't like it. But I know that's the point, is to show how gross this guy is.
Well, even in the first scene that he's in, where it's like a 15-year-old girl and young, Leung.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, like just you got your period yet? Ugh.
Exactly.
But then he whispers something in her ear, and she like smiles at it instead and takes the money. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Is he the Riz King, or is he a pedophile?
He's both. Like, that's Jack Nicholson in a nutshell. That's like,
I think Naf, to your point, that scene, it ties back to just showing just how fucked up and sinister this character is. Keith, I don't know if you finished your question on what you were asking earlier with the fast
I guess
cuts.
I want to know how you felt about the styles comparison. Like, because I feel like that's also what makes me feel like The Departed and Infernal Affairs aren't just, because like we were talking about like Upside versus Upside versus
Untouchables.
The Untouchables. And
fantastic film, by the way. Watch it and then listen to our podcast episode on Spotify.
Yes, The Untouchables, brilliant film. But like the thing being that like it feels like The Untouchables is trying to almost be a shot-for-shot remake. But one thing that The Departed and Infernal Affairs have, I feel like, is like they are very much of the same mind, while stylistically being very different.
Marley joined us in chat as well. If you guys aren't following, follow the
Yo.
Real Lovers podcast. They're on Instagram and YouTube
Yes.
and all that kind of stuff. I'm actually going to be appearing on their podcast very soon. We're going to be talking about Coco, so shameless
There you
plug.
go.
So I'm curious, Zane, with you, did you feel that there was enough of a difference stylistically that kind of allowed for the two to kind of be a little bit more separated, as opposed to the American remakes that tend to be like legit the same thing?
I think that the elements that are different are just more Hollywood.
I
see.
was thinking that.
And so I think that Infernal Affairs is a better script and story, and like again going back to the themes, and I just keep coming back to that because that's what I stand behind the most.
Definitely.
Whereas I think that The Departed, it's more dramatized, right? Like the whole and the Hollywood aspect of like taking the three female characters, which IA did a disservice to the female characters, and I think they tied them back in a little bit more in the sequel and the prequel, by giving them more of a story. Whereas in The Departed, they turned that into one. They took three female characters and turned that into one character via the psychiatrist. But again, they did it from a love interest standpoint because that's Hollywood, baby. Sex sells, right? And so it's like there aren't really any things besides maybe some of the comedic beats and humor elements that I thought The Departed did better. Perhaps the only thing that I can say that I thought was better outside of those was when they almost find out who the other is in the theater, because I thought there was so much more tension in that chase scene in The Departed versus the very short, immediate cut in Infernal Affairs.
Yeah.
Infernal Affairs. I mean, well, in The Departed, Matt Damon kills someone, like, you know, like
Like,
flat
that is
out
a
just
very-
murders a guy.
Yeah,
That's a very
that's a
intense
huge
addition.
change, right?
I
Yeah.
was actually thinking that when I was watching the film, that I was like, part of me liked the actual like quick chase. I thought in Infernal Affairs worked really well for me, and it works fantastic in this other one as well. But in Infernal Affairs, that feeling of like, he's gonna like remember and latch onto that face. Like, I thought that worked really well, but I do love the addition of like those extra scenes afterwards. There is a lot of tension in that you hear the footsteps and you do think that it's Leo coming towards him, and then he turns around and stabs him. It's like, oh my god. But I wanted to say that I feel like, and this, people talk about this all the time, but like Western cinema often needs to be like simplified from like when it's being adapted.
Yes.
And so it feels like they've kind of taken this script and gone, okay, I don't know if my American audiences will be okay not knowing who to root for, so we need to give them a clear kind of...
Yeah, well, I mean,
good
if you
and
look at Tony Leung's character, right, like, as we established earlier in the movie, this dude is fucking smart, right? Like, with the way that he runs his business. And when you contrast that to the tie-in when he realizes who the mole is, in The Departed, it's because you see the envelope and you just see the screen of like, oh, that's my handwriting, right? But then you tie it into Infernal Affairs where he's remembering like, hey, this dude like was hitting like the envelope the way that he hit his leg, and like, oh, I've seen him do that other ways. It's showing you like, hey, this dude remembers shit. Like, he's smarter
He's a detective.
than
has-
Billy Costigan's character.
But they established that in the very beginning of the movie in a
Infernal Affairs?
brilliant way, like in Infernal Affairs.
Yeah.
Where like you see the thing of, because I think it was the difference between his character and then the other guy. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be getting this mixed up, because it was kind of with the as they grow older, and it's like, okay, I forget which actor was playing who in the opening scene. But there's the moment of one of them recognizes that the other guy has mismatched socks. But correct me if I'm wrong, the other guy was also doing the Morse code, and it was like, which did they notice?
Yeah.
Was that correct? Am I correct? Like in that?
I think it was like a test, right? To see
Well,
like, hey,
the
what is
test
this?
the test was that like, okay, if you notice the socks, that's one thing. If you notice the Morse code, that's more attentive.
Hmm.
Am I correct in that, or did I remember it wrong?
It sounds like
I
you're on the money to me.
Because I think that was why they chose Tony Leung's character to do the mission
Hmm.
rather than the other guy.
Well, I think that yeah,
I'm trying to remember.
I remember in Infernal Affairs, like, because we were talking about the difference in those scenes before, and in Infernal Affairs, it's more of a, it feels like you've got this, whatever, so like it makes sense for it to be you, but also you are very, very good, so you're perfect for this. And I think in talking about it with you guys, I take on the scene a little bit differently now, but in Departed, my initial like view of that wasn't that. It didn't feel like they were going, Leo, you're perfect for this. It felt more like they were being like, you're trash. Like, this is all you're capable of. But definitely have turned my mindset around on that. But yeah, that scene in particular, where they talk after Tony Leung has left the room, and he's like, oh yeah, he noticed the socks and whatever. Yeah, I think that goes to show how effective of he's like a Sherlockian mind.
Well, it also did lead to a scene that they kind of did in The Departed to a lesser effect than they did in Infernal Affairs. But it is that scene where they're looking across the table from each other and they're like they're basically like, I see my mole. And it's like, I see mine too. And it's that moment of being like, which I thought was a really nice touch. Because it's like, imagine that. It's that moment of like, it's kind of like playing like the game Mafia or playing like the game Werewolf, like as a kid, like where it's like, I know who's picked. I know which one of these guys is the guy.
Yeah.
But I gotta play the game. I can't tell you who it was.
I find it kind of interesting the sequence with when Matt Damon gets promoted so that he's finding himself.
That was great. That was fantastic.
When he calls Jack Nicholson's character, he's like, ha ha ha, yeah, they got me looking for myself, and it's like played as a joke. And again, in Infernal Affairs, it doesn't feel like that. It's like, again, I always felt the tension that I was like, this is dangerous. Don't get caught.
It's so interesting how two films can be so similar yet so different. Like that's what I take away from this experience as a whole, which I think that we should kind of wrap this up a little bit with that. But I think that it's so interesting to me how you can have two films, and this is kind of why I think that we shouldn't be done with remakes. I don't like the concept that they should be done of foreign films, because I think that is an American stamp of saying, oh, it's not good until we've adapted it, which I think is bullshit. I think that these films are brilliant. These films are incredible. I mean, we've talked about 3 of them on this podcast, of whether it was now Infernal Affairs, Intouchables, and Let the Right One In, which, all of those being eventually remade into have American remakes, all of which, with the exception of The Departed, are considered lesser. And I would still say that I think that the brilliance of Infernal Affairs set up some of my favorite stuff of The Departed. So ultimately, I have to say Infernal Affairs gave The Departed those storylines, which is some of my favorite stuff. So I have to say that, like, yeah, Infernal Affairs is incredible, if not 10 times better. But while I still prefer The Departed, I think that, hey?
I said I'm clipping that.
Fair enough. Where I do appreciate that, I do prefer The Departed, but I do think that Infernal Affairs is incredible and should not be understated how good this film is. And as you said, it's quick, it's nice, it's not that long, and it's like it just is. It's just, there isn't fat on that film.
Yeah.
There's no scene you could cut in Infernal Affairs and it would work. Like, every scene kind of has a purpose.
Yeah, I totally get that. So particularly when we talk about adaptation, the conversation is always like, was there a reason for this? Did it deserve to get made? Like, what is your guys' opinion on that with these two films?
Zane, would you like?
I think that it is good because you're opening the story to a completely different audience.
Mm.
You know?
But do you think that The Departed justifies its need for, like, justifies its adaptation of Infernal Affairs?
In some ways, but I think it goes back to the idea of like dumbing it down and just making it more of a typical American movie. Because you're left with a very different thought at the end, you know? And it's like, I think that foreign cinema, at least for me, it usually leaves me thinking more at the end.
I think they're
than
a little
the
bit
American
more
movie where it's like
with subtlety and kind of going,
Sure.
you think of this for yourself.
You figure it out.
Yeah.
You figure it out. You figure out what the implications of this are.
And
I think that that's fair.
I think we watched Legend. We watched Legend for the podcast with Kari, which you should give her a follow as well. To Star Wars Tia.
I have a great example for you, Naf, that you're gonna appreciate and Keeks is gonna hate. Okay.
I'm excited.
I know what you're gonna do.
So if you look at The Last Jedi. No, I'm being serious here. If you look at The Last Jedi, a lot of the audience doesn't understand why Luke turns out the way that he does. And they don't understand the hell that he's living in mentally,
because we haven't seen it.
And what's that?
Like, part of that's because we haven't seen it. It's not my
sure,
Luke,
but they can't understand how someone can go from A to B because it's not spelled out for them, right? Contrast that to Infernal Affairs and The Departed, where again, you are shown how badly this whole process has taken a toll on the mole, you know, and how much he wants out and how this wasn't the life that he really wanted, but he was put into it. Versus Matt Damon, where it's very simplified of like, yeah, self-serving, great, I got away with it. You know, maybe I didn't get the girl, but like, hey, I put it all behind me and I'm good until he gets shot. And it's all spelled out A to Z. So you're not getting all the self-implications of like, hey, let the audience figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's what's very different about American cinema versus otherwise.
There was a point that I wanted to add to that as well, because like I was saying,
Keegan looks fucking distraught right now. Like he hates this.
No. Truly,
but-
I could not agree with you more, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things that
Keegan,
I think that
I was talking. What are you? You're just stealing my point.
he was making fun of me.
Yeah. So
I
let
was
me make
only
my
looking
point.
for the
We'll
one-
come
You
back to
make
you.
your point. Fine.
So-
I'll
so-
get back to my point afterwards. Go.
It was really funny because with Legend, we had a scenario where Ridley Scott made a movie, showed it for test audiences in the West, and they were like, we don't get it. So they kind of reshot the ending, reframed the ending, re-released it. They put like opening text crawl and stuff in there to explain the world. And then it did better in the West. But there's a European cut which is the favorite now, and everybody agrees that the European cut is better. And what was funny is when we did the podcast episode, Keegan saw the American cut and I saw the European cut. So I came out of it going, I loved how it introduced us to the universe and it left me with questions and like, I thought about it a lot. And Keegan's like, what the hell are you talking about? That didn't happen. I had a text crawl explaining the universe. It was like Star Wars in red. Yeah, so I think
correct.
that's... It goes to show exactly that yes, some Western audiences just aren't, it's like it sounds kind of demeaning. I don't mean it to be that way, but like sometimes they want to be spoon fed a little bit. Like here comes the choo choo train.
I don't think it's demeaning if it's true. You know,
Yeah,
like
Keegan, you're a
think that-
slut.
Okay, well, I mean that's fair, but like we didn't need to talk about my sex life. But that's like, when it comes to this, the only thing that I would posit is I think that the issue stems from, this is a wider, systematic, and longer discussion. But I think it comes down to the difference in how film studios treat their audiences there, because you see it in indie cinema. Are you going to tell me that Greta Gerwig spells it out for you?
Very true.
Are you going to tell me that Noah Baumbach? Are you going to tell me that Barry Jenkins spells it? Jordan Peele spells it out for you.
But I suppose that they're also.
I,
You have scenarios where Jordan Peele doesn't spell it out for you, and then you have Logan Paul go on Twitter and make a thread about how it's so stupid because he doesn't understand
exactly.
it. And you're like,
but the thing is, then I go, it's not that. Like, I think it's a more nuanced discussion. I agree with you in general that in general, but it's also the same reason that Italy, when they make mafia movies, can't make nuanced characters out of that story, because they need to address the fact that the mafia is very real here, and we don't want to come off as endorsing it.
Yeah,
it's a different. Here we can make mafia movies that are very nuanced and very much like Godfather, where it's like, okay, this is the story of the American dream, but also we're not portraying as these actions being the best, but also here's the reason why. And it's like, there's a lot of nuance here. You can't do that as much in Italy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a thing where it's...
I was going to say, that is a whole Bruise and Bullshit episode that we could do just on that. So it's important we don't get carried away, because we do need to wrap up.
Absolutely. I think we should do a Bruise and Bullshit episode about the concept of subtlety. Because I think that I think it oftentimes separates when people are like, there's a lot of jokes that always come around when the Academy Awards make their nominations, right? And it's like, a lot of people go, and the 8 films no one's heard of. And it's like, they're also the best.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly like, these are... But then again, I also look at something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is incredibly subtle. Like, it's in your face with all these other aspects, but it's an incredibly subtle story, and look how well that did. So it's kind of like, to me, they chose to portray this, and keeping in mind this was 2000, this was like mid 2000s. This film was 20 years old, as we were just discussing. It, to me, I think we've grown in a lot of ways where the nuances of media literacy, in a lot of ways, with like, they're going to be your dumbasses. There are going to be. But they had them then, and they have them now. That's never going to change. But I do think that we as a film community have grown in the desire for subtlety. We're just not being met with it. Like, because I think there's a lot of people talking about the mediocrity in film right now. Not in the indie world, but in the mainstream world.
Yeah.
So that's my only, in defense of the Western audience.
Yeah.
I don't think that you're wrong, Zane, that different cultures focus on different things. It's why in a French film, you're going to get a much more nuanced look at sensuality and sexuality than you would in film, because in France, they won't think twice at a nipple, but they will shy away from gun violence. Yeah. Here, we got no problem with shooting guns, but dear God, if we show a healthy relationship with sex in it, oh my God, hide the children. Like,
that's why I want to move to France. I'm kidding.
Well, for various reasons, but like, that's my 2 cents of, I agree with you. I think that seeing these films, it's why people should watch more foreign cinema, just because you're going to get a so much cooler, nuanced experience by doing it.
I think, to add to your point, Keegs,
broaden your horizons.
Yeah, and to add to your point, Keegs, I think it very much is studio driven. Like, it's them
Definitely
going, we need to play this safe and get as much. They're not as interested in telling like complex stories. They're interested in making money, right? Like, that's where it comes from. But more often than not, I doubt that filmmakers are going into something going, I want to make something dumb and easy to digest, like...
Exactly.
Yeah. And Marley makes a great point. Over 449 films were made last year. Only 10 of those were Best Picture. So if you're only watching the mainstream stuff, it's like, yeah, there's this crazy...
You're missing a lot.
There. Yeah. But I think that's a really good place to close the episode on. Zane, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share with us? I mean, thank you again for bringing these 2 films. It was brilliant for me getting to watch both of them. I'm really glad that I got to watch them.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, if you're a listener, stick to that theme, right? Like, broaden your horizons. Don't just watch what's given to you in your backyard. There's a lot of things out there. Yeah. If you if you only ever try one cuisine, you're very much limiting yourself, and the same is true for movies.
And sexuality.
It's all
Happy Pride.
about. Yes, correct. Well played. Um, as we wrap this up, yes, let's leave on that note. Zane, you put it incredibly well. That's perfect. And obviously, we all want to. That's why we did this. That's why we want to continue doing this, to be able to go on that journey with all of you guys. And continuing that journey,
I was gonna say
we
the same
are.
thing.
We actually have a very good one coming up next Friday. Naf, would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Nalbus, our friend Jim, who is on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and you guys can go and give him a follow. He is a huge fan of wild, wacky art house shit, and he is bringing the 1977 Nobuhiko Obayashi's fairy tale film House to us, which is, I mean, I'll read you the blurb. A schoolgirl takes her 6 classmates to her aunt's country house. There they come face to face with evil spirits, a house cat, and a haunted piano. Like,
I mean,
I have no idea what I'm
Are you not
for.
sold? Are you not sold?
I have no idea what we're getting into, but it is his favorite film of all time, and he is very, very, very excited. He's been asking me for months to watch this film, so it's gonna be interesting. I don't know where we're gonna find it, because apparently it's very like weird and wild and not.
We gotta
easy to
find, because
Um,
the Infernal Affairs was hard to find. I had to create a Redbox account to watch Infernal Affairs.
That feels.
Oh, you should have told me. I
motivated.
would have just Dropboxed it to you.
Damn it! But, like,
If you want 2 and 3, let me know. I'll send them to you.
absolutely, I will. But we'll find House and we'll kind of go with that. But Naf, where can people find you, my friend?
Yeah, well, we've got On Second Thought everywhere. I thought it was a nice original name, but it's not. There's another On Second Thought that has many more followers than me. So I'm not the one that talks about psychology. I'm the one that talks about movies. So you follow me on TikTok at on_second_thought. You've got the link in bio there, and you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube through our One With The Films page as well. And all of our episodes are available to stream live. Obviously, we do live episodes. So if you are listening, you can check us out on YouTube. If you want to join in live, be part of the chat, as you guys can see, we're always trying our best to engage with you guys as much as we can. And it can be a little awkward when we're talking to the chat and you're listening going, who's talking right now? So definitely come and check us out live as well. And our episodes are available to stream anywhere you find your podcasts as well. So Spotify, Google Play Music, Amazon Music, Apple Music, all of the podcast places.
Absolutely. And Zane, where can people find you, brother?
And what will they find if they do? Give us your 10
yes.
second elevator pitch.
I am my 2 credits on everything. That's the number 2 credits. So think my 2 cents, but Star Wars. I am on YouTube. I do Lego content there. And then I haven't posted on TikTok in a hot minute, but I mostly do Star Wars content there with some Lego splashed in. So if you're looking for Star Wars or Lego, I'm your guy.
Amazing.
He's an incredible follow, both on YouTube and on both on YouTube as well as on TikTok. Zane, you're incredible. Thank you coming on. You obviously have been one of our longest, biggest supporters, frankly, of this podcast. Like, for a while, we could always just count on at least having you in there. And words cannot express how much that meant to us week to week. And to have you have 2 episodes now where you have been on here, as well as the previous one. If you want to hear more from Zane with our podcast, you can check out our Andor spoiler review with Sue's Theories. We did a whole talk about where it was myself, Naf, Sue, and Zane. We all talked about Andor, the spoiler review, if you guys are interested in hearing more from Zane. But, guys, you can also find me at Movie Man Opinions on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and then obviously here on YouTube.
Yeah.
If
you want great content, he's your buy.
I am your buy.
I was thinking of that joke ever since he said I'm your guy. I was like, somebody needs to say I'm your buy. It's Pride Month.
I had a moment today with that, but it was with The Boy Who Lived. I was thinking The Buy Who Lived. And so, I was debating either The Boy Who Lived Come to Buy or The Buy Who Lived Come to Die.
You just spell come differently.
Exactly, very different. So anyway, on that note, guys, this podcast is always about expanding that palette and making sure that we all enjoy getting through this watch list together, seeing films that we never would have seen otherwise. And thank you for coming along on another episode with this. And just come and join us next week, next Friday. And we are so excited to have you guys. We love you all. And as my friend Raglan says, tacos are pretty good.